All right, so get this. We're starting 2025
Oh, yeah.
with some pretty wild weather.
Really?
Southern California is battling these intense wildfires,
Oh, wow.
fueled by this heat wave.
Uh-huh.
But at the same time, parts of the South are just buried under mountains of snow. I mean, we're talking over a foot of snow in New Orleans.
Wow.
Have you ever seen anything like it?
Have crazy, right?
Yes,
On
yeah.
one hand, we've got these raging wildfires.
Yeah.
And then on the other hand, you've got folks using laundry baskets as sleds in Alabama.
I saw that.
It's wild.
It's crazy. It really makes you wonder, like, what is going on with our climate
Yeah.
and what are we doing about it?
Exactly.
And that's exactly what we're diving into today.
Okay.
We're going to explore the link between these extreme weather events and climate change.
All right.
And we'll unpack the political storm that's brewing around it all.
We'll look at the global push for green energy initiatives
Okay.
and contrast that with the newly inaugurated President Trump's very aggressive pro-fossil fuel agenda.
I mean, the stakes are high, right?
Absolutely.
Especially when you consider the economic impact.
Yeah.
I mean, extreme weather has already cost the global economy trillions of dollars in the past decade alone.
It's a huge problem.
So let's start by taking a look back at 2024.
Okay.
It was a year of intense, record-breaking weather events across the globe.
For sure.
I've got the week's article here on the year's crazy weather,
Oh, yeah.
and they've got it all laid out chronologically for us.
It was a turbulent year.
Yeah.
Starting with that heavy rainfall and flooding on the U.S. East Coast in December 2023.
Right.
I mean, almost 500,000 people lost power in the Northeast.
Wow.
And get this, China, a country that rarely sees snow,
Right.
experienced a historic cold snap with record low temperatures and snowfall.
That's wild.
It was.
And those early events really set the stage for what was a crazy year.
Yeah.
Then in January 2024, over 40 U.S. states were under winter weather alerts,
Oh, wow.
with blizzards and record snowfalls hitting even states like Texas,
Yeah,
which aren't usually prepared for that kind of extreme cold.
definitely not.
But at the same time, January 2024 ended up being the warmest January on record globally.
Yeah, that's the thing about climate change, right?
Yeah.
It's not just about warming. It's about increased variability and more frequent extremes.
Uh-huh.
So we see hotter hots, colder colds, and more
Particularly-
dramatic swings between them.
It's like the Earth's thermostat is broken,
It really is.
and that variability just continued throughout the year.
Yeah.
In February, California was slammed by a series of what scientists are calling atmospheric rivers.
These are essentially massive plumes of moisture in the atmosphere
Okay.
that can just dump enormous amounts of rain.
So that's what led to the severe flooding that California experienced.
Exactly.
Meanwhile, on the other side of the Pacific, Chile was battling devastating wildfires.
Yeah, the worst national disaster they'd seen since the 2010 earthquake.
It's almost like a cruel cosmic joke, right?
It is.
Too much water in one place, not enough in another.
And what's fascinating here is the connection between these seemingly separate events.
Okay.
Climate change is altering weather patterns globally. So as some areas get deluged, others experience prolonged drought, creating those prime conditions for those intense wildfires.
So it's all connected.
Exactly.
What happens in one part of the world
Yeah.
can have ripple effects across the globe.
Absolutely.
And these events weren't just isolated incidents.
No, they weren't.
March brought this early spring to much of the northern hemisphere.
We saw record low snow cover
Yeah.
and pollen counts just soaring as
Yeah.
plants bloomed ahead of schedule.
Crazy.
And then, as is typical for spring, especially a warmer one,
Yeah.
the U.S. Midwest was hit by this wave of tornadoes.
Oh, man.
Over 100 of them,
Wow.
with some reaching that terrifying EF4 category.
And just a quick reminder for our listeners.
Yeah,
The enhanced Fujita scale measures tornado intensity,
right.
and EF4 is one of the most destructive categories.
Absolutely.
So these warmer temperatures, particularly in the spring,
Yeah,
contribute to the formation of these powerful thunderstorms.
which are the birthplaces of tornadoes.
Right. It's like a chain reaction.
It is.
And it's all linked to this bigger picture of climate change.
Exactly.
And then April arrived, and it's like Mother Nature just decided to throw everything she had at us.
The Northeast got hit with a classic nor'easter.
Oh, no.
Heavy rain, 2 feet of snow, wind gusts over 50 miles per hour.
And then just for kicks, there was an earthquake in New Jersey. A 4.8 magnitude.
Wow.
Not huge, but definitely unusual for that region.
Definitely.
And sadly, Taiwan wasn't so lucky.
Oh.
They experienced a 7.4 magnitude quake, injuring hundreds,
Oh, geez.
and marking their strongest earthquake in 25 years.
It's a stark reminder that while we tend to focus on these weather-related extremes,
Right.
climate change impacts the Earth in so many ways,
Yeah.
potentially even influencing seismic activity.
Uh-huh.
It's an area that needs more research, for sure, but the potential connection is there.
Absolutely. And just when you thought things might calm down, May arrived. Yeah. And it was heatwave central.
India, Mexico, the U.S., everyone was sweltering.
It was rough.
And remember what we said about variability?
Yes.
Well, India saw especially alarming overnight temperatures.
Really?
Dr. Andrew Pershing from Climate Central was quoted saying that climate change made those high nighttime temperatures more likely and more dangerous.
Why are those high nighttime temperatures so concerning?
Well, they don't allow for the usual cooling period at night,
Right.
which puts immense stress on people, infrastructure, and ecosystems.
Oh, I see.
Our bodies, our cities, even our plants and animals need that nighttime reprieve.
Yeah, to recover from the heat.
Exactly.
It's like running a marathon without any rest stops.
It is.
And the heat just kept coming.
Yep.
June saw more of the same. The U.S. Midwest and Northeast roasted under a massive heat dome with temperatures soaring over 100 degrees.
And remember that early spring we talked about?
Yeah.
Well, it came back to bite us in the form of incredibly intense thunderstorms
Oh, no.
and a historic tornado outbreak in Maryland.
Ugh. It's like the atmosphere was out of whack, swinging from one extreme to another.
It seems like climate change is making those swings more dramatic and more frequent.
That's exactly it. It's like climate change is loading the dice, making these already existing weather patterns more extreme.
Right.
We're not necessarily seeing new things happening. We're seeing familiar things happening.
Right.
But just on a scale we've never seen before.
Exactly. And those scales tipped even further in July 2024.
Oh, boy.
It was the hottest July ever recorded on Earth.
Wow.
And with that heat came Hurricane Beryl,
Uh-oh.
the first Category 5 storm of the season,
Yikes.
hitting the Caribbean and the southern U.S.
A Category 5 in July? That's unheard of.
And the timing of that hurricane is crucial.
Okay.
It was the earliest formation of a Category 5 hurricane on record,
Wow.
which highlights how climate change is shifting the seasons
Right.
and making extreme weather events possible outside of their typical window.
Right.
It's not just hotter,
Yeah.
it's hotter earlier, which throws everything off balance.
And that pattern continued into August.
It did.
We saw the hottest August on record with more intense rainfall, thunderstorms, and then Hurricane Debbie slamming into Florida.
It's like one extreme weather event after another.
It really is.
That consistent pattern of record-breaking temperatures month after month.
Yeah.
It really underscores the magnitude of the climate changes we're experiencing.
It's not just a blip on the radar.
It's not.
It's a sustained trend.
For sure. And then in September, California got hit with a double whammy.
Oh, no. What happened?
First, a heat wave fueled wildfires across the state.
Of course.
And then suddenly, temperatures plummeted so drastically that some regions even saw snow.
Talk about whiplash.
These rapid temperature swings are another hallmark of climate change.
Yeah.
They make it incredibly difficult for ecosystems and communities to adapt.
And then came the hurricanes.
Oh, yeah.
In September, Hurricane Helene, the third deadliest hurricane in modern U.S. history, devastated the southern U.S. with historic flooding and billions of dollars in damage.
And as if that wasn't enough, October brought Hurricane Milton,
Oh, jeez.
the third hurricane to hit Florida that year.
While Florida was dealing with those deluges, most of the rest of the U.S. was facing record drought conditions.
Yeah, with over 87% of the country abnormally dry.
It's like a chaotic, unpredictable seesaw of extremes.
This is a prime example of that uneven distribution of climate change's impacts.
Right.
While some areas face extreme precipitation and flooding,
Yeah.
others are parched and vulnerable to drought and wildfires.
And the extremes just kept bouncing around the globe.
They did.
November saw deadly flash floods in Spain,
Right.
and South Korea and the U.S. Northeast were buried under record snowfalls.
It's important to remember that each of these events has a ripple effect.
Yeah.
They impact not just the environment,
Mm-hmm.
but also economies, infrastructure, and most importantly, human lives.
And that brings us to December 2024,
Yeah.
with more snowstorms and the sobering reality that this extreme weather roller coaster just keeps on rolling.
It does.
And then we started 2025 with that unprecedented winter storm in the southern U.S.
Yeah, the one that blanketed even New Orleans in over a foot of snow.
Right. The first ever blizzard for the Gulf Coast.
That storm highlights an often overlooked aspect of climate change.
Okay.
It's the potential to disrupt areas that are typically ill-equipped for such extremes.
I see.
The southern U.S., for instance, lacks the infrastructure, the equipment, even the clothing.
Yeah.
To deal with heavy snowfall and freezing temperatures.
Right.
It led to widespread disruption, traffic accidents, states of emergency.
It's like the world just wasn't prepared for winter to show up in places known for sunshine and beaches.
It certainly raises an important question.
Yeah.
If even relatively developed areas can be caught off guard by these unexpected weather events,
Right.
what does that mean for global preparedness
Yeah.
in the face of even more extreme climate impacts?
It's a chilling thought. It also brings us to the heart of the matter.
Okay.
How are we as a global community responding to this climate chaos? What are we doing about it?
That's the big question, isn't it? And that's where things get really interesting, from like a political standpoint.
Yeah.
While we're seeing these undeniable real-world consequences of climate change,
Right.
there's this intense debate raging about what to do about it.
Yeah, it's like we're caught in this tug of war between those pushing for a rapid transition to green energy and those clinging to those fossil fuels.
Right.
And President Trump's second inauguration has definitely thrown fuel on the fire.
Figuratively speaking, of course.
Right, of course.
But yeah, on his first day back in office, he signed a series of executive orders that were designed to roll back environmental regulations
Really?
and boost fossil fuel production.
Wow.
It's a stark contrast to what we're seeing in many other countries, which are forging ahead with these ambitious green initiatives.
So let's dig into Trump's Day One agenda,
Okay.
as our source document calls it. Right off the bat, he revoked California's groundbreaking ban on the sale of new gas-powered cars.
The one set to take effect in 2035.
Right, exactly.
He also nixed the electric vehicle mandate, essentially giving a green light to those gas guzzlers.
And that move has some significant implications.
Right, huge implications.
Because first, California's auto emission standards are often seen as a model.
Yeah, for the rest of the U.S. and even internationally.
Exactly. And second, 11 other states had adopted California's zero-emission vehicle regulations.
Wow.
Meaning Trump's action impacts almost 40% of the U.S. population.
That's a big chunk of people.
So it's a major setback for clean transportation.
Absolutely.
And then he went full steam ahead with a drill baby drill approach,
Oh, boy.
opening up public lands offshore areas.
Wow.
Even the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge to energy exploration.
And his justification,
Yeah.
a national energy emergency,
Okay.
which conveniently allows him to bypass existing laws and fast-track these fossil fuel projects.
So it's a pretty controversial move.
Very controversial.
It's got a lot of environmental groups gear up for legal battles.
I bet.
It seems like he's taking a giant step backward
Yeah.
when it comes to climate action.
Big time. And speaking of steps backward,
Oh,
remember the Paris Climate Accord?
of course.
The agreement signed by almost 200 countries to reduce greenhouse gas emissions.
Right?
Well, Trump pulled the U.S. out of it again.
He did not.
This is actually his second time withdrawing the U.S. from the Paris Agreement.
Wow, so it's a symbolic move,
It is.
but a powerful one.
Absolutely.
It signals to the world that the U.S. is turning its back on global climate cooperation.
Exactly. And what about the billions of dollars
Yeah.
allocated for those clean energy initiatives in the Inflation Reduction Act?
Right. What happened to those?
Gone.
No.
Trump disbanded the White House office overseeing those funds
Wow.
and indicated his intention to rescind them.
So it's like he's erasing any progress
It is.
that was made on climate action.
It's a bit disheartening to see these rollbacks happening.
It is.
While the evidence of climate change is becoming more and more apparent.
What's especially concerning is the message this sends to the international community,
Yeah.
right? While many countries are investing heavily in green technologies and policies, the U.S. is doubling down on fossil fuels.
It undermines global efforts to address climate change
Yeah.
and creates tension on the geopolitical stage.
And speaking of tension,
Oh, yeah.
there's this showdown brewing between California and the federal government.
Right. California has long been a leader in environmental policy, setting stricter emissions standards and pursuing those ambitious green initiatives.
But Trump's actions are creating a direct conflict.
It's a battle of state versus federal power,
Yeah.
with California determined to maintain its right to set stricter environmental regulations.
And it's not just about cars.
No, it's not. The Trump administration hasn't approved several of California's clean air initiatives,
Like what?
including their efforts to phase out those fossil fuel-powered trucks and locomotives.
It sounds like a clash of ideologies with very real consequences.
It is. And to make matters worse,
What?
Trump has threatened to withhold disaster aid from California
Really?
if it doesn't fall in line with his policies.
Is that even legal?
It's highly controversial
If
and has been widely criticized.
Yeah, I mean, to use disaster relief as political leverage
Right.
is deeply concerning.
Especially considering the scale of devastation California has faced from those recent wildfires.
It's almost unbelievable that this is happening while the world is grappling with the very real impacts of climate change.
I know.
It seems like we're at a crossroads.
We are, and the world is watching to see which path the U.S. will choose.
What do you mean?
Well, in fact, the unprecedented winter storm that hit the southern U.S. was covered extensively by Chinese news outlets.
Really?
Yeah.
What was their take on it?
They were fascinated by the images of snow in New Orleans and Florida.
I bet.
They highlighted the vulnerability of a region so unaccustomed to such weather and pointed to it as evidence of the unpredictable and increasingly dangerous consequences of climate change.
It makes sense. It's not every day you see palm trees covered in snow.
It's not.
So what does this global attention mean for the U.S. and its stance on climate change?
That's the million-dollar question.
I mean, the U.S. is a global superpower.
It is.
And its actions or inactions
Right.
on climate change have a ripple effect worldwide.
For sure.
So what does this all mean for us, for our listeners,
Yeah.
for the future of our planet?
Right.
We've got these extreme weather events happening, political battles raging, and the whole world watching.
Yeah, it's a lot to process.
It really is.
Let me try to connect the dots for you.
Yeah.
Firstly, the science is clear.
Okay.
Climate change is not some future threat.
Right.
It's a present reality,
We're seeing it.
as we've seen with the extreme weather events of 2024.
And we're feeling it in our wallets, too,
Right.
with the trillions of dollars in economic damage.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Secondly, the political landscape is complex and often at odds with the scientific consensus.
Okay.
We've got a president pushing a fossil fuel agenda
Right.
while much of the world is moving towards green energy.
It's a clash of ideologies with real-world consequences.
It is. And thirdly, this recent winter storm in the southern U.S.
Right.
is a wake-up call.
Yeah.
It shows that even areas that don't typically experience extreme weather can be caught off guard
Uh-huh.
and unprepared for the impacts of a changing climate.
It raises serious questions about our collective readiness for what's to come.
It's definitely a sobering thought.
It is?
The question is the political will to tackle this global crisis strong enough to match the scale of the challenge?
That's the big question, isn't it? I mean, do we have the collective will to face this challenge? What do you think, listener? Are we just going to keep riding this roller coaster of climate chaos, or can we find a path to a more sustainable future?
It's a tough question, and there are no easy answers. We're at a point where we need to bridge that gap between science and politics and find a way to act collectively to address this crisis. It's a challenge that demands our attention, our creativity, and most importantly, our action.
It can feel overwhelming,
Yeah.
right? All these extreme weather events, the political back and forth, the global implications. I mean, where do we even begin?
You're right. It can feel daunting, but there are things we can do. Staying informed is crucial. We need to understand the science behind climate change and the potential solutions.
And engaging in a constructive dialogue is essential, too.
Yeah.
We can't just shout at each other from across the political divide.
Right.
We need to find common ground and work together to find solutions.
Exactly. And ultimately, we need to demand action from our leaders.
Yeah.
We need policies that promote clean energy, reduce emissions, and prepare us for the impacts of climate change that are already happening.
We've seen the consequences of inaction.
Yeah,
2024 was a year of unprecedented extremes,
it was.
and the costs, both economic and human, are staggering.
And as we move forward, it's important to remember that this isn't just about saving the planet. It's about safeguarding our own future and the future of generations to come.
This deep dive has been a real eye-opener.
It has.
It's connected the dots between the science, the politics, and the very real impacts we're seeing across the globe.
It's all interconnected. And while the situation is serious, it's not hopeless. We have the knowledge, the technology, and the resources to address this challenge. What we need now is the will to act.
So what's the takeaway for our listeners? What can they do to make a difference?
Stay curious, stay engaged, and stay hopeful. The future is uncertain, but it's not set in stone. Our actions today will determine the world we inherit tomorrow.
We're all in this together.
Yeah.
And while it can feel overwhelming, remember that every action, no matter how small, can contribute to a more sustainable future.
That's a great point. Individual actions, when multiplied across communities and nations, can have a significant impact.
So listener, we challenge you to think about what you can do. Can you reduce your carbon footprint? Can you support businesses and organizations that are working towards sustainability? Can you advocate for policies that promote clean energy and climate action? Every step counts.
Absolutely. And remember, this isn't about perfection. It's about progress. Every effort we make, no matter how big or small, brings us closer to a more sustainable and resilient future.
Well said. And on that note of hope and action, we wrap up this episode of The Deep Dive. Thank you for joining us on this journey of exploration and discovery.
It's been a pleasure diving deep with you.
And we'll see you next time as we delve into the future of artificial intelligence. It's going to be fascinating.